This is BBC News. I'm Karin, Giannone. Our top stories for viewers in the UK and around the world. Bad news for Britain's ruling Conservative Party as the opposition crushes them in 2 parliamentary by-elections. It piles more pressure on Prime Minister Boris Johnson. The Conservative Party chairman has also now resigned.
We've got to recognise that there is more that we've got to do, and we certainly will. We will keep going, addressing the concerns of people until we get through this patch.
The US Senate passes the most significant gun control bill in 30 years, but the reforms are limited. Ukraine's President Zelensky welcomes the decision to make his country an official candidate for European Union membership as a victory for his embattled nation. The Taliban appeals for international support after Wednesday's devastating earthquake in Afghanistan.
Upside down, going to me inside out.
Let the music begin. The Glastonbury Festival is set to get underway after a 3-year interruption. Hello, Britain's Prime Minister Boris Johnson has suffered a major blow when his ruling Conservative Party lost 2 by-elections in one night. The Liberal Democrats ousted the Conservatives in the rural farming seat of Tiverton and Honiton in one of the biggest ever by-election swings. Labour took Wakefield in the north. Shortly after the results came through, the Conservative Party chairman, Oliver Dowden, resigned. Mark Lebel reports.
One of Boris Johnson's Conservatives' safest seats until now.
Ford, Richard John, Liberal Democrats, 22,537.
They've lost in what was a rock-solid area for his party in southern England for decades. The Liberal Democrats with a record win and a clear message aimed at him.
Your extraordinary efforts have delivered an historic result and sent a shockwave through British politics. Tonight, the people of Tiverton and Honiton have spoken for Britain. They've sent a loud and clear message. It's time for Boris Johnson to go. And go now.
At the other end of the country, in northern England, there was utter joy for the opposition Labour Party. Another upset for the government, who have lost a key brick in the so-called Red Wall that had symbolised their sweeping victory over Labour 2.5 years ago. Now it's Labour's turn to celebrate.
Tonight, the people of Wakefield have spoken on behalf of the British people. They have said unreservedly, Boris Johnson, your contempt for this country is no longer tolerated. Your government has no ideas, no plan to address the big issues facing our country. It's not acceptable.
It was the British Prime Minister's first electoral test since the vote of confidence in his leadership called by his own MPs. With his authority at stake, he's currently more than 4,000 miles away in Rwanda, but will no doubt have some explaining to do back home, where he has been dealt another big blow with the resignation of the chairman of the Conservative Party. Oliver Dowden wrote to the Prime Minister, "We cannot carry on with business as usual," leaving Boris Johnson with a key question to answer, whether he remains a vote winner. Mark Lobel, BBC News.
Well, the Prime Minister is currently in Rwanda. Our political correspondent Alex Forsyth has been travelling with Boris Johnson and joins us now from Kigali. Alex, the Prime Minister 4,000 miles away from some pretty dramatic events here back home.
Yeah, and those events will inevitably overshadow what was planned here for today, and that is the opening of this official meeting of Commonwealth leaders. Boris Johnson had wanted to be talking about that, about trade links, about education, about sustainability, about climate change, but instead It is those domestic problems which are going to dominate. Now, there are no wobbles from the number 10 team here in Kigali, seemingly this morning. I'm told Boris Johnson was up and about early, as he usually is, fully across the news. He's been in touch with senior members of his cabinet, as I'm told he regularly is, and they are keen to show that he is getting on with the job. He spoke to reporters a little earlier. Let's have a listen to what Boris Johnson had to say.
I think that what governments have also got to recognise is that although, I don't want to in any way to minimise the importance of what voters are saying, it is also true that in mid-term governments post-war lose by-elections. I think if you look back to last May, the truly astonishing thing was we managed to win Hartlepool in a very different circumstances. What we need to do now is reflect on where voters are and I think what they're basically feeling is that we came through COVID well, we took a lot of the right decisions there, but we're now facing pressures on the cost of living. We're seeing spikes in fuel prices, energy costs, food costs. That's hitting people. We've got to recognise that there is more that we've got to do, and we certainly will. We will keep going, addressing the concerns of people until we get through this patch.
So Boris Johnson speaking there to reporters here in Rwanda a little earlier. You heard the crucial bit of that clip, and it's when he said, we've got to keep going. It reflects what Boris Johnson was telling us before we flew out to Kigali earlier this week, the fact that governments often lose midterm elections, the fact that he said it would be crazy were he to quit. But you've got to remember the scale of these defeats are bigger than many expected. And what was unexpected was the resignation of Oliver Dowden as the party chairman. So I think for a lot of Conservative MPs now, they will be taking stock and thinking, for all the Prime Minister is saying that he's not going anywhere, he's got a lot of work to do, is he the right man for them?
Alex, thanks very much for the moment. Alex Forsyth there in Rwanda, where the Prime Minister is attending a Commonwealth summit. But let's go back to events here in the UK, to Devon, to Tiverton, where the Lib Dems overturned that 24,000 Conservative majority, and join my colleague Sean Lay. Hello to you, Sean. The winner there in Tiverton calling this a shockwave. Any reaction from the Labour leader?
There has been reaction from the Labour leader, Keir Starmer. This is not a seat where the opposition Labour Party would expect to win, although they were in second place here the last time this seat was fought as a general election. But overturning that majority here in Tiverton, a majority of, you say, more than 24,000, makes this in numerical terms the biggest ever by-election defeat a British government has suffered. That majority turned into 6,144 for Richard Ford, the new Liberal Democrat MP. There are only 40 of Boris Johnson's Conservative colleagues in the British Parliament who have a majority bigger than 25,000. So there are a lot of nervous people in the Conservative Party. Labour's focus was on the West Yorkshire constituency of Wakefield. That is a seat they used to hold and lost in 2019. One of the reasons they lost was Boris Johnson's popularity back then in what had previously been safe Labour seats. Keir Starmer, the leader of the Labour Party, celebrating his party's success in Wakefield. Here's what he had to say.
Now we've had the sort of swing that puts us on track, not just for a Labour government, but for a majority Labour government. So this is hugely significant for the Labour Party. And I'm so proud that we can present that confident Labour Party utterly focused on the voters. That's what I wanted to achieve, and this is evidence that we're on course for a Labour government.
But some of those voters are saying that they are defecting to you as a protest this time. It's a lack of enthusiasm for Boris Johnson, not enthusiasm for you.
On the back of that result here, that swing, I'm afraid that argument just doesn't carry. People came across to the Labour Party because the Labour Party was talking to them and for them.
Now, there are two things to note from what Keir Starmer had to say there. The swing to the Liberal Democrats here in the constituency of Tiverton and Honiton was 29.9%. It's an enormous swing, but this is a by-election. And by-elections often go badly for governments in the middle of their term, and then they go on to win the general election. But there's something else that's different. On no previous occasion that I can recall has a party chairman, the man in charge of campaigning, resigned within a matter of an hour or so of the result being declared, and put out a letter saying this: we cannot carry on with business as usual. Somebody must take responsibility. The latest in a run of very poor results for our own party is what he described these by-elections as being. That was Oliver Dowden, a cabinet minister, a colleague of Boris Johnson's, who then went on to pledge his loyalty to the Conservative Party, but made no mention of the Prime Minister's leadership. That has raised questions over how serious a result this may be for Boris Johnson's prospects, and Boris Johnson will be spending his time not just in Kigali, but then in Munich and then in Madrid. He actually has a farm about 20 miles from here, yet he won't be in the country for more than a week. Well, let's talk now to our correspondent, Jenny Kumar. Jenny Kumar, you cover the southwest of England. You know this patch extremely well. How has this campaign been here?
Well, this is an extraordinary result in what is normally a very ordinary Conservative, true blue area. It's been Conservative for more than 100 years. But the Lib Dems really fought their campaign hard. I've spoken to people that live in the area, and they said, you know, they were inundated with mail shots, as they were from other parties, but it was noticeable just how much material they were getting through from the Lib Dems. Ed Davey, the party leader, visited 4 times. You know, hundreds of activists poured into the area. In contrast, you know, the Tories, they had a lot of big hitters that came down, but we often found out about them after the fact. They kind of posted on social media, so there wasn't that kind of the media opportunities to do interviews on them. And with Labour, there weren't many front benchers that came down. So there were rumours that perhaps there was some kind of political pact between Labour and the Lib Dems, which were denied by both parties. But it does appear that what's happened is there has been some tactical voting, because it was only 3 years ago that Labour came second here, but the Lib Dems have clearly leapfrogged and done much better than that. So, as I say, an extraordinary result in an area that has been, you know, I've covered politics in this area for a number of years, and it's a pretty stable area. Not a huge amount happens, but we've had the extraordinary set of circumstances that led to this by-election, with the former MP here, Neil Parish, resigning after admitting to watching pornography on his phone, and then this extraordinary kind of upset. This is the 3rd seat that the Lib Dems have taken from the Conservatives, where they've overturned considerable majorities.
Jenny Kumar, thank you very much. I should say, in handing back to you, Karin, that as Jenny said, this is the 3rd seat that in England that has gone from the Conservatives to the Liberal Democrats, all of them on significant swings. And the biggest fear that Boris Johnson will have this weekend is that the prospect of a general election, perhaps 2.5 years away, in which Labour take back some seats, the Lib Dems take back others, and that would be enough to end the Conservatives' 13 years in government.
Sean, thank you very much for now. Plenty more from Sean throughout the day here on BBC News. That is in Tiverton, where the Lib Dems overturned a 24,000 Conservative majority. On to other news. The US Senate has passed a gun control bill, the most significant firearms legislation in 30 years. The new bill includes tougher background checks for buyers younger than 21 and billions in funding for mental health and school security. The reforms fall short of the demands of gun control advocates. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer said it was overdue.
This is not a cure-all for all the ways gun violence affects our nation, but it is a long overdue step in the right direction. Passing this gun safety bill is truly significant, and it's going to save lives.
Our correspondent Peter Bowes in Los Angeles told us how important a development the vote was.
This is the most significant gun legislation to come out of Congress in almost 30 years. Now, it isn't a done deal yet. Clearly, it has been passed in the Senate. It now goes to the House of Representatives, where it is also expected to pass. It could happen very quickly in the next day or so, and then it'll head to the desk of President Biden, where he will sign it into law. This is legislation that the president wanted to see. It doesn't go as far as he and many others wanted. It doesn't see a ban on assault-style weapons, for example, or those high-capacity magazines, but it does include a raft of other measures that there is bipartisan support for. We've had 50 Democrats, 15 Republicans in the Senate. If you think of recent political history, that's a very unusual situation to get that level of agreement on legislation, and especially gun legislation. So we have this bill that, for example, includes increased background checks for people under the the age of 21 if they want to buy a gun. There'll be financial assistance for the states to enforce so-called red flag laws where guns can essentially be confiscated from individuals if they are deemed to be a threat or a danger to themselves or other people. And there's going to be a tremendous amount of money, millions of dollars to spend on mental health programs and also security in schools.
Peter Bowes, stay with us here on BBC News. Still to come as the scramble continues to get aid to the victims of Afghanistan's earthquake. We'll be speaking live to a spokesperson from the International Red Cross.
China marked its first day of rule in Hong Kong with a series of spectacular celebrations. A huge firework display was held in the former colony. The Chinese president, Jiang Zemin, said unification was the start of a new era for Hong Kong.
The world's first clone has been produced of an adult mammal. Scientists in Scotland have produced a sheep called Dolly that was cloned in a laboratory using a cell from another sheep.
For the first time in 20 years, Russian and American spacecraft have docked in orbit at the start of a new era of cooperation in space.
Challenger powered past the Bishop Rock Lighthouse at almost 50 knots, shattering the record that had stood for 34 years. And there was no hiding the sheer elation of Richard Branson and his crew.
You're with BBC News. I'm Karin Giannone. The latest headlines. A crushing double defeat for Prime Minister Boris Johnson as the Conservatives in England lose 2 by-elections to the Liberal Democrats and Labour. The US Senate has passed the most significant gun control bill in 30 years, but the reforms fall short of the demands of gun control advocates. The Taliban have appealed for international support after the devastating earthquake which struck Afghanistan on Wednesday. Survivors of the deadliest quake in 2 decades say they have nothing to eat, no shelter, and fear a possible cholera outbreak. The BBC's Sekunda Kamani reports from Paktika province.
Aid agencies have been transporting food and tents to the earthquake-hit parts of Guyane and Barmal districts here in Paktika province, travelling along the long, dirt, bumpy road from Sharana, the nearest big city, which is where we are now. Taliban military helicopters have also been used to fly in supplies because the location is so remote. Taliban officials telling us the search and rescue operation is now over, the focus very much on those who survived this earthquake, getting them adequate food and shelter. Mobile health teams are also visiting these villages. Now, yesterday, in a briefing at the Security Council, a senior UN official described this disaster as a tragic reminder of the myriad dangers facing the Afghan people at this moment. The country was already in the middle of an economic and humanitarian crisis, with average incomes slashed by around a third. That's in a country where many people were already struggling just to survive. And whilst humanitarian aid, that immediate short-term aid, is being delivered, wider international development funding that the previous government used to rely on, well, much of that has been cut off ever since the Taliban took power last August.
Sekunda Kamani, let's talk to a spokesperson for the International Committee of the Red Cross for Asia Pacific, Anita Dullard. Anita Dullard, thank you very much for joining us. Just tell us what the situation your staff are facing is like.
The situation is really devastating for so many people in these communities. Whole families have lost their lives and have been trapped under the rubble, and whole villages have been devastated. So our partners, the Afghan Red Crescent, have deployed a team of around 30 people to support local volunteers who obviously mobilised immediately, and they're providing blankets and food, clean water, and all kinds of basic necessities, because of course people have lost their homes, they've lost the possessions that they have, and they're really needing as much assistance as can be brought into the area.
And as we've been hearing since this tragedy, this is a disaster on top of a humanitarian crisis. How difficult do these provinces and their location and their geography make getting to people who really need help?
the remote and rural location of Patika makes it quite difficult to travel. We've sent in medical supplies to the teams that are already on the ground to support them, but it can take hours or days for people to move from the province to seek healthcare in the facilities within the province. So it's really a very difficult situation for people who are there. Because the roads are so blocked, because they're very precarious, people were being treated in the open air, and we have been starting to see patients arrive at the ICRC supported hospital in Gosling, and we expect that we'll still continue to see people arrive.
And Anita, as far as you know, is the search for survivors still going on among the rubble that you're encountering?
It has been reported that that search either is going to come to a conclusion soon or already has. Our teams aren't involved in the search and rescue operation, but we certainly expect that the needs there for the people who have lost everything, including their family members, is going to be huge. So our forensics team will be working with local authorities to look at how we can support in supporting families to bury their loved ones.
How, when you've got a country in a dire economic situation like Afghanistan, where money is so badly needed, how do you persuade potential donors who are reluctant to donate to Afghanistan because of the Taliban regime? How do you persuade them and reassure them that their money goes to the people who are most in need?
Look, when development aid was withdrawn from Afghanistan, it really brought the public sector to its knees, and that means that hundreds of thousands of Afghans no longer had a salary. Critical infrastructure like hospitals really were almost on the point of collapse because they couldn't afford the fuel for ambulances. They couldn't afford the fuel for generators to keep the lights on. So, without the support of states and development actors in Afghanistan, the situation is very likely to continue to deteriorate. So we would really encourage states and development actors to recommence their support for Afghans and for the vital projects that are so incredibly needed.
OK, we must leave it there. Anita Dallard of the ICRC joining us from Bangkok. Thank you. Let's get some of the day's other news. President Zelensky has welcomed the decision to make Ukraine an official candidate for European Union membership as a victory for his embattled nation. The process has moved at record speed since Ukraine applied to join just days after Russia launched its invasion. Hundreds of flights have been cancelled by Brussels Airlines due to a walkout by staff unhappy over working conditions. The strike by pilots and cabin crew is set to last until Saturday, with more than 300 flights dropped from the schedules, disrupting the travel plans of almost 40,000 passengers. Now, over the past 2 days, 200,000 visitors have been arriving for the first Glastonbury Festival in 3 years. The music programme's due to start in a few hours' time, with Billie Eilish, Foals and Little Sims topping the bill on the first night. Our correspondent Colin Patterson has been meeting some of the festival goers.
Right, where have you come from?
Knoxville, Tennessee.
Whoa!
Yeah.
All the way especially for Glastonbury?
Yeah.
Who are you really wanting to see?
Really excited to see Paul McCartney. Like, I grew up on the Beatles, and I don't know, it seems like a very special opportunity.
Who's the biggest Beatle fan here?
It's probably me.
Yeah. Wait a minute, I've seen a problem. Rolling Stones t-shirt right opposite here.
Well,
is there going to be a fight?
Yes.
Right, let's have a song off. You give us one line of a Beatles song, you give us one line of a Stones song.
Blackbird singing in the dead of night. I'm not singing anything on TV.
And the Beatles have won. Round one to Paul McCartney.
Thank you, thank you.
Where are you guys from?
We are coming from South Korea.
Especially?
Yeah. This year, I really want to see Sam Fender. Will you talk in the morning?
There we go. Come on.
Billie Eilish, Noel Gallagher, McCartney.
La 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 la. Hey Jude. We're not such a good singer, are we?
I don't feel I need to see him anymore.
Just because you feel good doesn't make it right.
Skunk and Nancy, who once headlined on the Pyramid stage here.
I look forward to the Pet Shop Boys.
Right.
In a West End town, in a dead end world, East End boys and West End girls.
West End girls.
There we go. I'm wanting to find out who people want to see on the stages, which music acts you all want to see.
Jamie T. Sheila goes out with her mate Stella, gets poured all over her fella. That's all.
Do you know what I like? You did that on your own. Not one of your family joined in to help you. They didn't even clap. Well done. I've just realised there's actually people in the thing you're pushing. I'm so used to being drink when people are pushing. Hi, Wilfred. That's one of the more intelligent responses I've had today. What music does Wilfred like?
Upside down, boy to me, inside out. No, he seems really impressed.
Wilfred is unimpressed. I'm with you, Wilfred.
Guyana rolls, legendary slot, because the legendary slot already has the flash mob like that.
Are you going to tell us you've learnt the dance?
I will play for you.
Upside down, round now, inside out.
And the weather forecast isn't too bad, remarkably. That is the BBC World News for now from me, Karin, Giannone, and the rest of the team here in London. Goodbye.
Hello, a big change to the way our weather feels over the next few days. That's probably best demonstrated by me taking you to North East Wales. This was the scene yesterday. This was the temperature 28 Celsius, 82 Fahrenheit. Same place though this weekend, 19 degrees, a degree or so down on where we should be for the stage in June instead of significantly above. Now there will still be some heat around today, especially across the eastern half of the country. But elsewhere, it's starting to turn that bit cooler. Mixture of sunshine and showers. Showers breaking out a bit more widely through the Midlands, Northern England and Scotland through the afternoon. Some of those could become heavy and thundery. Some, though, staying completely dry with some sunny spells. More cloud from the Northern Ireland, Wales and the southwest, where we'll start to see some longer spells of rain or drizzle edge their way in. 17 or 18 here, but notice eastern parts of Scotland down to eastern England, probably around 20 to 26 degrees. And it's here where we see the best of the afternoon sunshine, where the highest of the pollen will be. Pollen still high towards the southwest, including Glastonbury, but it will take a bit of a knock as we see the cloud increase later. Some brief glimpses of sunshine this afternoon, but then late afternoon into the evening, some rain and drizzle will work across the site. And we could see some heavy showers turn up towards the end of play in the England-New Zealand Test match at Headingley. A few heavy thundery showers in the area, certainly. They'll push their way northwards overnight, as will our weather front. Band of cloud, rain or drizzle, pushing through most parts into the morning, then clearing to leave clearer skies. Sunny start to Saturday, 11 to 15 degrees, certainly not cold, but not quite as warm as it was this morning. Now, as we go into the weekend, the big picture shows this area of low pressure. This is driving the change to our conditions. It's going to be thereabouts to the west of Ireland throughout. Notice the rain band wrapped in around it, which will spiral into Northern Ireland throughout the day, although some of the further east may stay dry. Scotland, England and Wales, lovely sunny start for the vast majority, and some will stay dry with sunny spells all day long, but there'll be a few showers cropping up here and there. And temperatures down on recent days, 16 to 22 Celsius, which still, out the breeze, will feel pleasant in the sunshine. Breeze gets stronger towards the west as you go through into Saturday evening, and that's as our area of low pressure starts to nudge slowly eastwards. Not a great deal, but what it does mean, if you're in Wales, northwest England and parts of Scotland, wetter conditions expected here for a time on Sunday. Rain still on and off in Northern Ireland, some heavy and thundery showers, a few showers south and east, but many will stay dry with sunny spells, for although cooler and also much windier. Bye for now.
You may think you hear interviews with politicians all the time, but how often do you hear what makes them tick?
I can't stand losing. Whether it's on the football pitch or in politics, everything is about the results. If you're on the pitch, you're on the pitch to win.
I think it's fair to say that when I was in my youth, I was a professional controversialist, and I liked exploring ideas and stirring things up.
Political Thinking with Nick Robinson, tomorrow at 8:30 on the BBC News Channel.
Hello, this is BBC News, the headlines. Prime Minister Boris Johnson and his Conservative Party have suffered a crushing double defeat as the Conservatives lost 2 important seats in by-elections. Questions now as to where this leaves Boris Johnson. He's currently at a Commonwealth Leaders Summit in Rwanda. He had suggested it would be crazy for him to quit if the party lost the 2 seats. The US Senate has passed the most significant gun control bill in 30 years, which includes tougher background checks for buyers younger than 21. But the reforms fall short of the demands of gun control advocates. Ukraine's President Zelensky has welcomed the decision to make his country an official candidate for European Union membership as a victory for his embattled nation. The process has moved at record speed since Ukraine applied just days after the Russian invasion. Boris Johnson has suffered a major blow after the Conservatives lost 2 by-elections in one night. In the Devon seat of Tiverton and Honiton, the Liberal Democrats secured more than 22,500 votes, overturning a nearly 30% Conservative majority swing. It's the biggest majority ever lost in a by-election. In West Yorkshire, Labour won back the Wakefield seat less than 3 years after the Tories snatched it at the last election. The Labour Party won by almost 5,000 votes. In response, Oliver Dowden has resigned as Conservative Party chair, saying the election result is a clear judgment on the party and that the country deserves better. The Prime Minister has said he will listen to voters, but he's vowed to keep going. He was speaking in Rwanda, where he's attending the Commonwealth Leaders Conference.
I think that what governments have also got to recognise is that, although I don't want to in any way to minimise the importance of what voters are saying, it is also true that in mid-term governments post-war lose by-elections. I think if you look back to last May, the truly astonishing thing was we managed to win Hartlepool in a very different circumstances. What we need to do now is reflect on where voters are and I think what they're basically feeling is that we came through COVID well, we took a lot of the right decisions there, but we're now facing pressures on the cost of living. We're seeing spikes in fuel prices, energy costs, food costs. That's hitting people. We've got to recognise that there is more that we've got to do, and we certainly will. We will keep going, addressing the concerns of people until we get through this patch.
Well, the Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer has been celebrating his party's victory in Wakefield.
Now we've had the sort of swing that puts us on track, not just for a Labour government, but for a majority Labour government. So this is hugely significant for the Labour Party. And I'm so proud that we can present that confident Labour Party utterly focused on the voters. That's what I wanted to achieve. And this is evidence that we're on course for a Labour government.
But some of those voters are saying that they are defecting to you as a protest this time. It's a lack of enthusiasm for Boris Johnson, not enthusiasm for you.
On the back of that result here, that swing, I'm afraid that argument just doesn't carry. People came across to the Labour Party because the Labour Party was talking to them and for them.
The leader of the Liberal Democrats, Sir Ed Davey, gave his reaction to his party's historic win in Tiverton and Honiton.
I think what happened was people were saying Boris Johnson must go. When we talked to people on the doorsteps, they were fed up of a Prime Minister who's not fit and decent to be the Prime Minister of our great country. They feel that he's a lying lawbreaker and that he doesn't have a plan for the issues that are worrying people. People are deeply worried about rising prices. Pensioners and families, not able to put food on the table, worrying about the price of petrol to fill up their cars, and they don't feel the Prime Minister has got a grip at all.
Sir Roger Gale, Conservative MP for North Thanet, has spoken to our colleagues this morning about the recent electoral results and the role of Prime Minister Johnson.
The results of the 2 by-elections, by the way, have commiserations for both of our candidates who fought long and hard, and they deserve better. But the result was clearly a massive vote of no confidence in the Prime Minister. Another one, a fortnight ago, 41% of the Conservative Parliamentary Party indicated they had no confidence in the Prime Minister. I think an honourable man would have gone at that time. This Prime Minister seeks to struggle on, and I understand that this morning he has said that he will listen, but he will carry on. Well, he's not listening and he's blundering on. And frankly, we're now fighting, I think, for the soul of the Conservative Party, which is what I really care about. Margaret Thatcher had a majority and she honourably resigned. Theresa May had a majority, and she honourably resigned. This Prime Minister is choosing to hang on to the door handle of number 10. But it can't go on forever, and it certainly won't go on until the next general election.
In Ossett, in Wakefield, where Labour won back the seat, it lost to the Conservatives in 2019. We can go now live and join our political correspondent, Karin Wheatley. Karin, over to you.
Good morning, thank you. Yes, well, you join us in Ossett for the Friday market. It's really busy this morning, lots of people shopping and sitting in the sunshine having a cup of tea. Well, this is the town that woke up to a new MP this morning for Wakefield constituency, and it's Labour once again. In the early hours of the morning, Simon Lightwood was announced as the winner of this by-election. Now, perhaps not a real surprise to anybody here or to anybody following the Wakefield by-election closely, but Labour have done better than expected in terms of the majority, just under 5,000. It did beat their expectations a little bit. So we've had Labour very keen to play up the significance of this win this morning. Keir Starmer was here a short while ago with supporters in the early morning sunshine, as we've just heard, along with Simon Lightwood, talking about this hugely significant win, saying that voters here could see Labour as a united party, as a confident party. He talked about the Tory party imploding. So, of course, Keir Starmer very keen to play up the significance of this win. But how significant is it really in terms of their longer game plan? Well, we could look back to the Corby by-election in 2012 when Labour won that seat and then went on to lose the following general election. So how far can Labour kind of keep that momentum going here in the north and winning back other seats that they lost to the Tories in 2019?
Thank you, Karin. Well, Newsnight's policy editor Lewis Goodall has been following developments throughout the night, and he's still here.
Still here.
Going strong, lots to talk about.
Absolutely.
So it's not just obviously chewing over the Tory losses, but the fact that the chairman has gone as well.
Yeah, I mean, normally at this point, after a really wounding set of by-election results, and we should say that this is the first time since 1991 that a governing party has lost 2 by-elections on the same night, that would be enough to talk about. And we will be talking about Conservative MPs' reaction and all of the various WhatsApp messages firing off in each and every direction. What is highly unorthodox is to have a minister, a cabinet minister, the chairman of the Conservative Party, before 6:15 in the morning, deciding to send a letter to the Prime Minister, who's not even in the country, and saying that effectively he's saying that someone has to take responsibility for this, and doing so in a way which makes it very clear that he's not extending his support to the Prime Minister and effectively implying and inviting some of his colleagues to do what he has done. And so we're in a situation of really quite profound political peril for the Prime Minister, in the sense that he's not in the country, he's not able as easily as he might be able to normally to influence events. He can't know exactly how the rest of the day is going to go. It's only, 10:15, 20 to 10, long political day ahead. Mark my words, the Prime Minister's political operation will be doing all they can to shore up support, phoning each and every cabinet minister, phoning them again, encouraging them to go on the airwaves, encouraging them to tweet. We haven't seen very much of that. We've seen the Deputy Prime Minister on the airwaves speaking to some of our colleagues. We've seen Priti Patel, the Home Secretary, doing the same. But it's very, very clear in terms of the line to take. They're skirting quite a difficult... They're having quite a difficult balance to try and calibrate, because on the one hand, they're having to say, as the Prime Minister said in Kigali, we're listening, we've heard the message from the voters, but then when challenged to say, well, what exactly is going to change in terms of policy or approach as a result of this, well, then they're less forthcoming. It's not entirely clear. The Deputy Prime Minister, Dominic Raab, said that that the Conservative government needed to avoid distractions, i.e. alluding to things like Partygate. But, Partygate has clearly been a significant element of why some people, at least, have decided to vote in the way they have. So clearly number 10 scrambling around a little bit to find a message. Long day ahead, as I say.
And the Prime Minister's due to be out of the country for 8 days.
Indeed.
Is he going to be forced effectively to come back before that? Can he stay out of the country that long with all this going on?
It's a really invidious choice for him, Joanna, isn't it? Because on the one hand, let's say he comes back. Well, clearly, everyone is going to interpret that as a sign of panic, that he's having to come back because he's worried that his political position is falling away very, very rapidly. Doesn't want to do that. He says he's got a very important agenda. He's at the Commonwealth Conference. He's going to the G7 in Germany later in the week as well. So he says that's very important, and he's representing the country, etc., etc. But of course, if he doesn't come back, And this continues to simmer over the course of the day. It could get worse. We could see more resignations. Who knows? And he's not able to be in the country and influence events in the way that he might be able to. And it's just all these little practical things. You know, some of his top comms team and political team will be travelling with him. That just slows down communication between number 10 and the whip's office and what's going on in Africa. It's just small little bits of sand in the gears of how the political operation works. It just makes everything that little bit more difficult. And of course, inevitably, comparisons will be drawn to other occasions when prime ministers have been out of the country and encountered political difficulty. Most famously of all, of course, Margaret Thatcher in 1990. She was in Paris during the first round of the Conservative leadership contest, the first ballot at that time. Many of her advisers encouraged her to stay in the country. She felt that she ought not to, that she had to be out in Paris at effectively the conference which marked the end of the Cold War, and she felt she ought to be there. But many people in retrospect and at the time thought it cost her because she wasn't there to be able to arm twist Conservative MPs. Now, of course, there isn't actually a contest going on right now because he's had one, and I think there will be Conservative opponents of the Prime Minister who rather wish that that contest had come now or had not come then, because I think I can be pretty sure that if that contest hadn't come then, we'd be looking at a no confidence vote as early as next Monday.
And the fact that it came then means he's effectively safe for a year, but the rules could change.
Yeah, I mean, technically it does. It takes the pressure off in the sense that, as you say, there would have to be some rule change, which would take a little bit of time. So we saw Sir Geoffrey Clifton-Brown, Conservative MP, member of the 1922 committee on the airwaves this morning, saying that effectively he and his colleagues are going to wait to see what the Prime Minister has to say, wait to see what he does, and then said, in his words, that they're going to have a difficult decision to make. And that is being interpreted as to whether the executive members of the 1922 decide to try and change the rules, or alternatively, the other alternative is that the Cabinet effectively say to the Prime Minister, look, I'm afraid the game is up. We haven't seen, I mean, one of the big strengths that Johnson has had up to now has been the Cabinet has been completely foursquare behind him. We haven't seen any resignations over Partygate or anything like that since today. Last resignation before today was Lord Frost. But if that starts to change, and we know that his position within the parliamentary party is pretty weak, given so many of his own MPs voted against him, it will be difficult for him. But we do know one thing about Boris Johnson, which is nothing if not extremely politically resilient, and he has a great will to power. He has a great desire to stay in power, come what may. So, you know, where other prime ministers may have decided in the past, oh, I'm going to go because I feel my authority is gone, I think we know that the only way in which he would be removed is if there were to be a rule change and he were to be voted out as a result of motions of no confidence, and that's not an easy thing to obtain at the moment.
Thank you, Lewis. Well, let's talk now to the political biographer and author of Boris Johnson, the Gambler, Tom Bower. Welcome. So he is extremely politically resilient. Do you think he could survive this?
Absolutely. I think that what he is benefiting from is that there's no outright contender. There's no rival who can unite the party, which is why they very foolishly, from the rebels' point of view, held the vote a couple of weeks ago rather than waiting until after these by-elections. So in that sense, I think he's secure. I think also the party machine knew that they were going to lose Tiverton. It was priced in that there was going to be an amazing rout, but the polling by the party shows that the Tory voters who either didn't go to the polls in Tiverton or voted Lib Dem will come back for a general election in 2 years' time. So they think that Boris can win again because the Tiverton Tories do not want a Keir Starmer government propped up by Ed Davey and Nicola Sturgeon.
How much of an impact, though, does it have that Oliver Dowden has gone as chairman? I think you met up with him actually recently, didn't you? Was there any inkling from him that he might be thinking this way?
Well, I can't say he confided in me that he was going to resign, but he's been made it quite clear that he's very unhappy that he was turfed out of the culture department without any explanation whatsoever and parachuted into central office, which is in a complete mess because I hadn't realized that they've moved a lot of the people up to Leeds and they lost some of the best of their officials. The machine Conservative Party machine just doesn't work properly at all anymore. And Dowden was losing influence vis-a-vis Boris because Boris doesn't like critics. He doesn't like people telling him things which he doesn't want to hear. And Dowden was not a happy party chairman. And I'm not surprised he's gone. He's a decent man. He wants a political career which isn't filled with failure. So I think that where Dowden was absolutely explicit is that there is no obvious rival for Boris's campaigning style. And Boris is convinced that he can recover over the next year and restore the party fortunes. And I suppose Dowden didn't want to go on that journey with Boris.
Thank you very much, Tom Bauer. Let's talk now to Conservative MP Paul Scully, Minister for Small Business. Welcome, thank you for joining us. How bad a night has it been for your party?
Well, clearly it's not been a good night at all. It's, you know, the two big defeats that we now need to make sure we reflect on and importantly respond to, because it's not business as usual. We can't just sit there and gloss over and pretend that nothing's happened. We've heard the messages loud and clear that what seems to have happened, and certainly in Tiverton, that a lot of our voters have stayed at home, and we need to motivate them to come out again. But we'll only do that not just through general campaigning, by responding to them, by having the answers for them for the cost of living issue, for the inflationary pressures that we are facing at the moment, that will be with us for some time.
You just echoed there one of the phrases that was in Oliver Dowden's resignation letter. It is not business as usual. And he said somebody must take responsibility. Was he the right person to take responsibility here?
Well, Oliver's a good guy. I've known him for a long time, and he's done great work as chairman and previously the Secretary of State for Culture, Media and Sport. And I know he'll come back in a great role in government and indeed the party in the future. But he's taken that personal responsibility for the approach of the by-elections, I guess. That's the motivation for his resignation. But the Prime Minister's also said that he takes responsibility for everything that happens under his government, whether it's the Partygate situation and changing the culture and ethos in number 10 and the Cabinet Office as a result of that, or whether it's the decisions we take as government, and that's not just now, but leading into the future, this cost of living and inflation pressure.
A lot of people, though, put the issues that the party is facing squarely down to the Prime Minister. What happened at number 10 with Partygate and other issues that have arisen, most recently the claims that Boris Johnson tried to get a job for his wife, Karin Johnson, when he was Foreign Secretary.
I think that a lot of people, I'm not sure about that last one, that would have particularly resonated with the public. For me, it seems a little bit of a scratching away at the scab when people have been attacking the Prime Minister since he was mayor. He's probably the most scrutinised politician in the world. But nonetheless... can you think of another Prime Minister who has had this amount of allegations thrown at them, and where it's a situation where it's been issues that have not been driven by external events, but by internal behaviour? Well, what I was going to say, I can't think of another politician that's been scrutinised as heavily as Boris Johnson, probably around the world. But throughout.
And why do you think that might be?
Well, throughout his career, but because he is a larger-than-life character, he's a brazen character, which is what's helped him get through Brexit, unlock that paralysis that we had in the 2 years, get through COVID, really face down COVID and get our economy unlocked again, and leading the international response in Ukraine. But I could talk about the fact, with all of that in context, that's still not enough for us to just say, you know what, we've had these two big by-election defeats, let's just brazen it out. That's not what we need to do. That's not what the Prime Minister wants. We need to reflect on it, and we need to make sure that we communicate the answers for not just do, but we also communicate well.
Do you think, though, that your fortunes might do better without Boris Johnson? Is it now a long way since the days when he was talked about as the Tory who could reach voters other Tories couldn't reach?
No, I think he is someone that I talked about the fact that he is someone that has got those big calls right because of his nature, because of his force of nature, and the way he approaches those kind of challenges. The last thing we need is to have that sort of vacuum and that sort of people talking amongst themselves as leadership candidates in the next 3 months, which will be pivotal in tackling inflation and the cost of living, because when you start talking down the economy, if you start getting the pressures from the unions that we're starting to see, you really do return to the 70s and 80s, which I can just about remember.
But sorry to interrupt you. I mean, just looking
the spiraling situation.
Just looking at the evidence, though, in front of you, Tiverton, there hasn't been another party voted for in 99 years there. It's the third biggest swing in any by-election. Does that ring alarm bells for you to signal that it's not just the usual by-election defeat for a sitting party?
Well, it rings alarm bells in so much that clearly people at Tiverton are concerned, and they're sending out a really strong signal. But it is midterm. I mean, even Margaret Thatcher lost 15 by-elections throughout her term, and then managed to win 83, 87, 90, and then obviously John Major in 92. So there has been a pattern before, but I come back to the point that we're not just going to sit there and I'm not going to sit there and spout to you political history as if that's the only thing that matters. What matters to people now is what's in their pocket, what their prospects are for their jobs, and what prospects.
And the Tory party has had a package of £37 billion worth of measures to tackle the cost of living, but it doesn't seem to be cutting through.
So some of that will actually come into place. You've got the national insurance threshold changes, for example, which will only start to kick in July. So people will start to see that. The £650 that's what payment to the lowest paid that was part of that package again.
Yeah, but sorry. I mean, so you're talking about the measures that obviously people know have been made and are coming through, but they're not cutting through. So what would be a game changer for the Tory party?
No, I mean,
what more do you need to do?
Well, look, first of all, you talk about £37 billion. Your average Joe in the street, what does that mean to people? I don't know what £37 billion looks like. It's so what does it mean to me? What does it mean to someone that's just busy cooking eggs, frankly? The £650 that they get, they can talk about this all they want. It's when they see it in their bank account, which I think it's the 14th of July, people will start seeing that coming into their bank account. That's when it really does start to cut through, when they can see action, not just hear about action and us talking about telephone numbers. But clearly, we need to make sure that we are communicating that better for people and seeing that demonstrable action.
Are you confident Boris Johnson will lead you into the next election?
I think he's getting the big calls right, and so he's the man to do that. But it will be Boris Johnson leading a government that has listened, that has responded, that's adapted to the messages that we are hearing from people like the electorate in Tiverton, much of whom stayed at home at our support, and people in Wakefield who want to see us levelling up the country, including people in Wakefield.
Paul Scully, thank you. Time for a sports update. We can get the latest from Isaac. Hello, Isaac. Sorry, you're behind me.
Hey there, Joanna. Yeah, it's finally poised going into the second day of the final test, and so much is going to depend on whether England's bowlers can strike early on and remove the stubborn New Zealand pair who've led the fight back at Headingley. England looked in control for much of day one, reducing New Zealand to 123 for 5. Jamie Overton with a wicket on his test debut. But then look at this freak moment, which also happened to be a massive slice of luck for England and bowler Jack Leach. Henry Nicol hits the ball pretty well. It looks like it's going to be heading for a 4, but then it glances off the bat of teammate Daryl Mitchell. You see the umpire's life flash before his eyes as the ball flies past him and into the hands of Alex Lees. Nicol, who's out, and he can't believe it, neither can we. Mitchell did go on, though, and along with Tom Blundell, frustrated England's bowlers with a century partnership with New Zealand closing on 225 for 5. England, though, they remain positive.
Yeah, it was a great day. A lot of nerves a bit this morning. A little bit nervous running into bowl with first ball. It wasn't my best ball, but we'll take it. And then, yeah, nice to get that first wicket on the board as well. I think we've had a good day. Would have liked probably a couple more wickets, but I think if you said to us at the start I played 250 for 5, we probably would have been very happy with that.
England's women continue their preparations for next month's Euros when they face defending champions the Netherlands at Elland Road tonight. It will be a reunion for England head coach Sarina Wiegman, who was in charge of the Dutch when they lifted this trophy. Northern Ireland's women lost their only warm-up match for the tournament. Lauren Wade's equaliser meant it was 1-1 until the 82nd minute. Then 3 late goals after goalkeeper Jackie Byrne was sent off gave Belgium a 4-1 win in Liège. Northern Ireland kick off their tournament against Norway on the 7th of July. On to Rugby League next, and defending champions St Helens have moved 6 points clear of the top of Super League after a dominant win over Leeds. Saints ran in 8 tries in all, including this one from Dan Norman. They're going for a 4th consecutive Super League title, and they're going to take some stopping after this 42-12 victory. Britain's Jack Draper is into his first ATP semi-final later today, and he is the only Brit left standing. Draper beat fellow British player Ryan Pennington in straight sets and will face Maxime Cressy this afternoon after the American beat British #1 and top seed Cameron Norrie. The main draw of Wimbledon takes place this morning, and there are some big names that could be paired up in the first round. No one is going to want to face wild card Serena Williams. She'll get onto the practice court on centre court later on. 2 of the men's favourites, Novak Djokovic and Rafa Nadal, have already been getting a feel of centre court. This year is the first time players are going to be able to practice on these show courts before the tournament. It's to help the new grass bed in and make it less slippy. Britain's Andy Murray, Dan Evans and Emma Raducanu are going to practice on court number 2 later. At the Women's PGA Championship, South Korea's In-ji Chun is the one to catch after a record-equalling opening round. The 2-time major winner is 8 under par heading into the second round. That's the joint lowest score in the history of the event. She made 9 birdies at Congressional Blue in Maryland. She has a 5-stroke lead over her nearest competitors. England's Mel Reid and Northern Ireland's Stephanie Meadow were the best of the homegrown talent, finishing 1 over par. But look at this runaway golf cart at that same event. Driverless, it found itself in the water by the 16th hole after an understandably feeble attempt to stop it. That is all the sport for now, Joanna.
Thank you. We're going to hear from Boris Johnson.
When the UK became your chair in office in 2018, the word COVID had not been invented. Many of us had no idea what a coronavirus was, and nobody could have known that the worst pandemic for a century would soon claim millions of lives. The British government put together the partnership between Oxford University and AstraZeneca that produced the world's most popular vaccine, and during our time as chair in office, the UK supported the delivery of more than 1.4 billion doses of COVID vaccines to Commonwealth countries. Thank you. The pandemic posed a common threat to all humanity, and the same is true of catastrophic climate change. No one understands this better than our Commonwealth friends in the Caribbean, the Pacific, and the Indian Ocean, who can see the incoming tide surging ever higher up their beaches, threatening to inundate their villages and towns, and in time, the entire landmass of some island states. For them, the baleful effects of climate change aren't vague or theoretical, but already happening before their eyes. When we hosted COP26 in Glasgow last November, it was these fellow Commonwealth leaders who spoke with the greatest urgency and authority about the perils of quilting the earth with greenhouse gases. And we in the developed world have an obligation to help our friends to cope with a danger they had no hand in causing. And during the UK's time as chair in office, the Commonwealth Finance Access Hub mobilised over $38 million for the most vulnerable members. But of course, we must press on and do more. And if I could imagine a silver bullet that would solve an array of problems and transform countless lives, it would be to give every girl in the world the chance to go to school. At the last CHOGM in London in 2018, the UK announced £212 million for the Girls' Education Challenge, and I'm delighted to say that this initiative is now at work in 11 Commonwealth countries, ensuring that girls are able to gain at least 12 years of quality education. We need to empower them to play